Hey viewers, I'm Garen Carlin, owner of Mosses Creek Outdoors. Come along with me as I tell a little story here involving our old-time squirrel and small game hunting from many years ago. Squirrel hunting's not near as big a thing nowadays as it used to be back when my granddad was growing up. Back when my granddad and his brothers and the rest of the family and my grandmother was a kid. Squirrel hunting was kinda in the place that deer hunting's in today. I mean, it was a big thing. And something else, back in them days, people didn't hunt just because they wanted to. They hunted because they had to. A lot of them in one house and had living together, and most cases just barely getting by. And a lot of them was real poor. And they had to hunt to eat. And that's far as the meat goes. I remember hearing my granddaddy talk about and tell stories about when his daddy used to farm and grow stuff, and he'd be plowing with a old horse-drawn plow, have a mule hooked in front of it, and he'd work in the fields and get so hot and tired, and far as when it come to corn and different stuff, he just didn't only have to grow enough for them and the kids to make it through the winter. He had to grow enough extra stuff that would be enough to feed his mules on all of the upcoming winter. One story I always remember hearing about was when my great-grandfather and some others in the family lived nearest to where I grew up. They lived on a 200-acre tract of ground, and day and time come, and my great-grandfather, he ended up selling that 200-acre tract of ground for $300. And that wasn't really because he wanted to. My grandfather's mother claimed they needed some Christmas money to buy for the kids. Just so many stories I remember hearing about for so many years about how happy that everybody used to act back then. People used to seem like they was a lot happier, a lot jollier, and took life so much easier than some folks do today. Most of us members in the Carlin family, we pretty much all grew up in the southwestern part of Tennessee. And my grandmother, she had 6 brothers and 2 sisters, and they grew up with her parents just up a little north of us, up in Trenton, Tennessee, in Gibson County. And my grandmother's told a lot of stories over time how hard they had it when they was growing up. They were so poor they just couldn't hardly make it. A lot of times they couldn't hardly get by, things was so bad. I try to enjoy life, the outdoors, and cherish history as much as I possibly can. Now here many years ago, this is my grandfather. This is made just a few miles from where I grew up. And as time went on, I started hearing him tell stories all the time about when him and his brothers and cousins and different people was kids, how they used to really believe in squirrel hunting. Now this picture here is my granddad, the middle-sized one on the right, along with his youngest brother and one of his older brothers. This was during the day when they was growing up. And here we have my granddaddy and 2 of his brothers and a niece and a nephew. Starting from the left would be my granddaddy's youngest brother Donald in the checkered shirt, and my granddaddy John in the white shirt. In front of my granddaddy is his nephew Jerry, and down in the middle with the dog is one of my granddaddy's older brothers, William, and then over beside him is their niece Judy and their old dog named Jack. Lots and lots of people back in the day really enjoyed it when it come to squirrel hunting. They get ready and go hunting. It was one of the favorite things to do, or was the favorite thing to do in the country. It was going after the squirrels. And they'd go out and kill these big messes of squirrels, and they'd bring them back home, and it would look something like this right here. It's something that they was extremely proud of due to it being meat on the table. A lot of the stuff that people hunted and brought up, they'd end up taking it to these people's house right here. This is my triple great grandma and grandpa. She wouldn't waste nothing. And she'd always tell that person when to be back to eat, too. I got a buddy here. He passed away a few years ago. He used to go up in Missouri and squirrel hunt a lot. He involved himself hunting with dogs a whole lot. He said it's a lot of fun. And something a little different to me that he used to do was he'd pull a horse trailer. You'd take a horse or two with him up to Missouri. He was in some type of a hunting camp or a club up there, but he said that was a real interesting process. You'd be on the horse and wait for dogs to tree, and you'd ride the horses to them. And he said you talking a lot of fun. You know, I know for a fact that the old time hunting once went on here, because I find too many other old shells when I'm out in the woods metal detecting. The old Peters Victors, the Remington UMCs, and the old Western Fields. So there's no doubt there was a lot of people out there circulating around through the woods after squirrels at one time. Probably 100 years or so ago. This is Theodore Carlin. This is my granddaddy's daddy. I once heard a story about him. He left the house to go on a squirrel hunt one time, and he didn't have but 6 shells. But anyway, after a little while, he come back to the house and had 6 squirrels. Back in those days, people didn't shoot just to be shooting. I mean, they made a shot count. I mean, they shot to hit something. They didn't just fool around and waste ammunition. And of course, they had to buy those shells from time to time. And back then, during that day, those shells was probably equal to what a $5 bill or more is now. You know, there was once a little backcountry school almost where I grew up named Shiloh. It started real early in the 1800s and went up to 1950. There was 3 Stedman brothers that taught school at Shiloh. And at one time, Audrey Stedman, there one of the teachers, he paid my granddaddy's oldest brother, Junior, and a guy named Austin Kirk 5 cents apiece for every squirrel they could shoot. And back in them days, a lot of the kids, I guess, they hunted on their way to school and on their way home. You know, to mention another old subject to do with hunting, I remember hearing some stories told about back in the old days when people used to rabbit hunt. They used to sit on the fender of an old car, straddle the front wheel. And an uncle of mine said he done it himself and said he'd hold on to the hood ornament. And they'd use a headlight on the old car to shine up the road. The old rabbit run out the road, they'd haul off and shoot him with a shotgun. They used to do that all the time. It's a big thing. Well, I'm gonna jump back to just a couple things to do with my grandmother on her side when she was growing up. This is her when she was a little baby, back when she lived at home in Gibson County in Trenton, Tennessee. The little one in this picture is my grandmother, and that's her mother holding her, Edna Mae Black. I remember her talking a lot when they lived at home, talking about how they used to really have to rely on rabbits and squirrels and different things as far as small game went. The little one in this picture is my grandmother also, but in this one, her oldest sister, Bobby's holding her. And here, this is my grandmother's oldest sister, Bobby, and one of her brothers out of the 6, Gerald. And Gerald's kind of making a little bit of a face right here in this picture because no older than he was, he literally thought arthritis was going to kill him at a really young age. Otherwise, they didn't have much to eat. They was poor, and just barely made it by lots of times. So I strongly encourage you to enjoy the outdoors as much as you possibly can. And think about your history. Think about who your folks was and what they done and where they come from and what you know them for. So keep the tradition of small game hunting going and pass the tradition down to younger generations. I appreciate you watching on this episode involving old-time squirrel hunting and history. Until next time, I'm Garen Carlin, owner of Mosses Creek Outdoors, and I'll see you next time.